All right. Today, we're going to talk about the uncomfortable emotion of resentment. This is an emotion that all of us have felt, and this is one of the most common emotions for mothers in business. We carry so much of the load, both mentally and physically, just because we have more responsibilities when we are holding a business and raising kids. And so oftentimes when clients come to me, they are very resentful. And sometimes they don't realize they're resentful. They're just feeling those top level emotions of the stress and the anxiety and the overwhelm. But usually once we start digging in, a lot of resentment and anger and a lack of feeling like things are fair are there. And so I want to talk about how we handle resentment. And I want to talk about first kind of what it looks like when it shows up in our lives and in our businesses and where it comes from, and then what we can do about it. For us to make any sort of change, we need to understand the importance of that change, and we need to know why we're changing it. And it's also great for us to have a very clear understanding of what we're experiencing. And in order to get change that lasts, we actually have to work through our current programming. And we are programmed and operate mostly from our subconscious mind. And so bringing things into our conscious awareness is how we actually change them. And so in this, to simplify that, when we want to change something, usually our reality, our circumstances, or something more specific as far as how much we're working, we first need to become aware of the thoughts, habits, patterns, feelings that are associated with or contributing to that. Because a lot of times we're just moving around through our days like robots. And this is why when I'm working with business owners, it's the beautiful meeting in the middle of us changing things tactically and us changing things internally. So it's the external and the internal change and how these things work together. And so before I get into today, I just want to address this idea of, or argument of, strategy versus mindset when it comes to business specifically. So mindset is one of those words that some people understand and some people don't really, but really mindset is how we think, and how we think really dictates what our lives look like. And then strategy is more of how we do things, how we're moving, what action we're taking. And so most people fall into one camp or the other. And there's this argument of, strategy is better because strategy is action, and action is what makes things happen. And then there's the argument of, okay, well, mindset is better because mindset is all about your thoughts and your belief system and your energy, and what your self-confidence is rooted there. And so that dictates, what you do and who you are and how you show up. And so as you can hear me talking through this, you're like, well, both those things matter, of course. And so I want to just give you that reminder of whatever you're seeking right now in your life and in your business, whether it is to grow, to scale, to make more money, to make a bigger impact, or whether it's to find that contentment and find peace in your life and find a way to where you can run your business and hold the amount of revenue that you're bringing in without it straining everything in your life. No matter where you are, both of these things are going to play a role, and both of these things working in both of these areas will dictate the results that you get. So if you go too heavy on the action and too heavy on the strategy, you're most likely not going to be able to sustain any of that long term, because you're not internally changing your operating system, how you're thinking and how you're feeling. If you're only focused on your mindset, there might be a level of fear of taking action that's like, oh, if I keep working on how I think, yes, you will, if you do the work, move differently in the world and take different action. But you will still need to know tactically what that action looks like. And so overall, that's just a reminder of what is important is that we have a good balance of both. And for business, our mindset is going to dictate what we can do, how far we go, who we are, the impact that we make. The strategy is going to be what holds and sets boundaries and creates a path for that mindset to actually work well. And that's why it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, it's that they work together. And that's why here on this podcast, you're always going to hear me bring things, even when we're talking about your mind and your behaviors and your patterns as a leader, you're always going to hear me bring that back into tactical action. And some of those tactical actions are going to be about changing your mind. But let's get back to the point of today, which is all about resentment. So what does resentment look like in our lives and our businesses? How do we know when we're resentful? It's when we feel like our expectations aren't being met, which is pretty common. As business owners, we have really high standards, and the hardest part about hiring a team and even scaling your team is being able to trust that team, which is actually going to be next week's episode. But it's really the fear that they're not going to deliver the same quality of work or meet your standards. And so resentment can be developed from your expectations not being met. It can also develop from feeling like there's a lack of appreciation. Again, we shoulder so much as mom business owners that we do a lot of that without being asked, but then underlying, we're like, why does nobody appreciate me? Why is nobody recognizing or saying that I'm doing a good job, right? That's why it can be so peaceful and calming for somebody to say like, hey, you're doing a really good job. But oftentimes we don't hear that from other people, and we definitely don't give it to ourselves. Resentment can also look like an uneven workload distribution. So this can fall in, especially in your home, right? If you feel like you're doing everything for your business and you're providing financially, and then you're also doing a majority of the responsibilities for your kids and all the mom stuff, that can feel very unfair. There's the traditional model of the very outdated model of, a man's role and a woman's role in the home. And I think that most of us are past that now. But I think there are some people that still have a hard time kind of breaking those roles, and it can feel really challenging against those masculine and feminine kind of energies. And it's so important that we challenge those traditional roles and that we have conversations and communicate with our partners about the workload distribution. Another way that resentment shows up and what it looks like in business and in life is going to be unmet promises or broken promises and broken commitments. Again, there's this trust that we all want to have in people, and we need it to succeed. And sometimes it takes longer to build, and sometimes we trust people until we don't. But we can get really resentful when promises are broken or people are not holding to their word. We can also be very resentful, and what it can look like is feeling chained to your business, feeling like it's a chore, feeling like you don't have freedom, everything feeling like you have to, everything feeling like if I don't do this, then this will happen. And so that creates a lot of resentment. And resentment can show up towards people, but it can also show up towards things. You can be resentful towards your business, where it's like you're making all this money, but you're stealing my life, you're stealing my joy, you're stealing my time. And that's just some of the ways that it shows up, which you may have felt some or all of these at some point And the important thing here is for us to really know, where does it come from? What are the underlying reasons that resentment develops? Because when we know that, then we can do something about it. And so here's a few reasons why resentment develops. There's typically some sort of unspoken or unclear expectations. This means that we would love for our partner to do the dishes, but we've never asked them to. This means that we would love for a team member to stop using that word in emails, but we've never asked them to. This means that we get frustrated when we have a deliverable to review from team, or we have something that we need to look at that's been done by team, and it is nowhere near what we wanted it to be. And that's because we didn't tell them how we wanted it to be. And so everything that we're talking about today when it comes to resentment is more so about you. It's easier for us to focus on external circumstances. It's always easier to place the blame on something or somebody else. The problem is that if we do that, it removes our ability to change it. And so we need to make sure that we're being clear in what our expectations are, what the standards are, what it looks like. Resentment, the biggest place that this shows up, or the biggest cause of resentment, is always going to be a lack of boundaries. I don't think I've ever recorded an episode and not talked about boundaries in some shape or form. And what's interesting about that is most of us, we're smart, we're entrepreneurial women, and we know we need boundaries. But the problem is not that we don't have the intention to have boundaries. The problem is that we're either not setting them or we're not holding them. And so when we have a lack of boundaries, we're externally, yes, sure, no problem. But internally, we're like, fuck you, why are you asking me for that? And that internal dialogue is resentment. It can also be one of the other underlying causes of resentment is a fear of conflict or disappointment. We're people pleasers. We don't want to make people upset. We're like, if I just choke this down, if I just don't speak up about this, if I just fix it myself, right? In business, like how many times has somebody sent us something that we're like, oh, this will take 2 minutes to fix. I'll just do it. When instead we should have taken the longer route and said, hey, I need this to be changed. This is why I need it to be changed. And let me be more clear about what my expectations were for this. That takes longer in that moment, but it saves us so much time down the line. Not every conversation needs to be, not every hard conversation needs to be conflict or controversial. We can actually have really good conversations that are also hard when we have the right communication skills. But a lot of us are thrown into entrepreneurship, and then we build teams and we have these people that are working alongside us and we don't know how to speak to them. And we're not sure of what we can say and how to say it in a way that doesn't make them upset. We're so concerned about making people upset or any sort of conflict that we just shoulder that as well. A couple of other places that are really the root of resentment are going to be comparison and overworking, being burnt out. Underneath that resentment of, why is this happening? Why are they like this? Why does that look like that? Why do I keep ending up here? Is somebody who's tired, somebody who is looking at somebody else's life or business and wishing it was theirs. And that's why we get so resentful, is because resentment is a position of powerlessness. And so if we're going to shift back into the seat of power, we're going to shift out of the seat of defeat, right? Because resentment is a place of defeat. Resentment is feeling like everything is happening to you. And so to shift out of that, what do we do? How do we shift when we feel resentful? How do we shift out of it? How do we break through this idea? How do we break through this feeling of being angry, being frustrated, feeling overwhelmed, feeling overworked, feeling like things are unfair? There's a few things that we need to do. And these are important. And these are things that you need to be proactive with. These are things that are staples in who you are. And so I'm going to start with my favorite. And my favorite is the one that you don't want to hear. And that is gratitude. There is nothing more difficult than when you feel like something is unfair, or something's happened to you, or somebody's done something to you, than to find gratitude. But if you can find it in those moments, you can find it in any other moment. And that's why this matters. Instead of being frustrated with the person, how can you find gratitude, or the thing? How can you find gratitude for that? So in your business, when you're feeling resentful because of everything it's taking from you, can you shift your perspective into all that it's given you and continues to give you? Gratitude is the most powerful tool. Gratitude is the way that we shift our perspective. And most times when we're resentful, we're not recognizing or being grateful for the things or the people in our lives. And so what would happen if the same team member or your partner or whoever you feel resentful towards, what would happen if you leaned into recognizing them for all they have given, all they have done, all that they are? How would that relationship change? And how do you think they would act towards you? It would absolutely change. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we're communicating clearly. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about unclear or unmet expectations. 9 times out of 10, when something happens that is not up to our standards, it is because we weren't clear on what the standards or the expectations are. If you tell somebody to buy 10 shirts for you and they buy you 10 green shirts and you wanted blue shirts, you should have told them you wanted blue shirts. Communication and clear, direct communication, another very powerful skill. But again, we're afraid of direct communication because we're afraid that it will be controversial or cause conflict or make somebody upset. Directness is politeness. Honesty is kindness. We owe it to the people that we are in relationship with to be honest. It is helpful for us and it's helpful for them. We also need to address our boundaries. We can have an idea of what boundaries we need to have. We can say that we're going to set boundaries. We can write them in our journal. We can tell our friends. We can tell our team. But when push comes to shove and a challenge comes in for that boundary, can you hold it? Because the problem is usually not setting. A lot of my clients have set boundaries or tried to set boundaries or have an idea of what the boundaries are. It's holding them. It's enforcing them. It's saying no to the thing that we said we were going to say no to, even when we feel scared of how they will respond. And so the enforcement of our boundaries to protect our business, to protect our well-being, to keep our word to ourselves is incredibly important so we don't build resentment. We also need to be delegating more. Even if you are delegating really well to your team, you are probably still doing things or fixing things that you don't need to be. And I would say that sometimes for a lot of my business owners, it's harder to delegate in their homes than it is in their businesses. Because I think we feel this sense of responsibility as mothers of like, that's my job as the mom. And this is something I personally had to get over a lot. And so you may know this story, but you may not. A lot of the heart of my business is built around my story and not having a present mother. And so reevaluating my role as a mom and redefining presence and what that looks like as someone who is also running businesses and not feeling guilty and seeing what does it actually look like for me to be present, for me to be emotionally and energetically available for my children? And what does my role as their mother look like as someone who is also the financial provider? And it's uncomfortable because, again, we just naturally, we're biologically connected to our children. If we, if they did grow inside of us, and you can't break that. And so we feel and hold the sense of responsibilities for all things for our children. And so for me personally, letting go of some of those things, being willing to take turns or have my husband, take one or both of the girls to gymnastics. It's like, it's okay, right? That's okay. It's okay. So I think that in our homes, it's important for us to evaluate what things are we doing just because we're the mom or just because we're the woman in the household. Another way for us to be less resentful is taking care of ourselves, resting, giving ourselves permission to be still or do things that create personal fulfillment for us. This morning, I met someone for coffee that was just a local woman in the area that we had met on Threads of all places. And we sat and just talked about kids and mom stuff and business. No pressure about, is this going to be a client? It was not that kind of conversation. It was just me having coffee with a possible new friend, which is a whole nother topic, I feel like. Making friends as an entrepreneur mom, right? But taking care of yourself, honoring your personal fulfillment. Truly, if you're happy, everything's different. If you're happy, if you're joyous, if you are living in a state of gratitude for your life, everything feels easier, everything feels lighter. When things happen, you're able to see them differently. And that's where it really comes down to shifting the way that you are and who you are. But taking care of yourself is a part of that puzzle, a very important part, because you're a human with human needs and you need to be fulfilled. And then last, but definitely not least, another one of my favorites is taking responsibility, ownership over your actions, words, and thoughts is the greatest thing you can do. And it is the greatest thing that you can do because when you take responsibility for where you are, who you are, how you spoke, what your situation is, then you also take responsibility over creating a different way, over having a different conversation, over creating a new reality. So if you don't like the way something feels, if you don't like the way your business is running your life, if you don't like the way that you can't sit still or that you're always stressed or you're always anxious, you have one way of thinking that is, I'm always stressed and anxious because my business is so busy and I'm so overwhelmed and I'm a mom and I'm trying to juggle all these things. That's how most people think. Or you say, I'm so stressed and anxious because I've created a business that is so heavily dependent on me overwhelming myself that this is my reality. And that can be changed because you're taking responsibility. That is you saying, I created this and so I can create something different. I hope that if you feel resentful or have felt resentful, or when you feel resentful again, because you likely will, it's an emotion, that you'll remember this and you'll go back through these things and you'll try to find gratitude and you'll find what your responsibility was and you'll think about how you could have set a boundary or enforced a boundary. You'll think about how you could have communicated more clearly. These are all things that are within your control. And that's the beautiful part about this. Everything I teach you is from that place. It's not you needing anything from anybody else. I'm so glad that I got to record this episode. So glad that you guys were able to listen in. If I can help you in your business, If you are stressed and overwhelmed and your business feels like a ball of yarn that you can't even imagine unraveling, let me help you. We will put, of course, my website, the mastermind application, as well as private partnership application in the show notes for you. And you have the responsibility to make a choice, to make a change. And if you're ready for that change, I work with women that are ready for that change. And I can change your business and I can change your life. And if that feels like something that you know you need, but maybe you've been denying and maybe you've been trying to figure it out by yourself, or maybe you're just afraid, you can also book a call and we can talk about it. We can talk about what working with me looks like specifically for you and for your business. So thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week.